GvHD Hub Podcasts, brought to you by Scientific Education Support.
Hello and welcome to the GvHD Hub Podcast. Today we'll be hearing from Mohamad Mohty of Hôpital Saint-Antoine in Paris, France.
I've been asked today to give you a brief overview about the highlights from ASH 2021 meeting regarding the latest advances in relation with steroid-refractory acute graft-versus-host disease. As we all know, acute GvHD is really a major complication, but also a barrier to the success of allogeneic stem cell transplantation. Obviously, the key to success is about prevention. And over the last few years, we've been some major successes, especially with the increasing use of ATG, anti-thymocyte globulin, especially in the unrelated donor setting. But more recently, the introduction of post-transplant cyclophosphamide, which is proving to be highly effective in preventing both acute and chronic GvHD. And now this is becoming a sort of a Swiss knife for prevention of graft-versus-host disease. However, despite all of these advances, we still have a proportion of patients who will continue to develop acute GvHD, unfortunately. And the first-line treatment remains high-dose steroids. However, and unfortunately, a proportion of the patient receiving frontline steroid, roughly 40%, I would say, it can go from 40 to 60% or 50%, let's say 40%, are going to become steroid-refractory. And this is truly an unmet medical need. We've seen recently the randomized phase 3 trial used testing ruxolitinib, a JAK2 inhibitor, in this landscape. And ruxolitinib, which is now approved actually in some countries for the treatment of steroid-refractory acute GvHD, is becoming more and more widely used. However, there are also patients who may not respond to ruxolitinib, so the ruxolitinib refractory patient. And obviously, ruxolitinib is not the unique answer to all patients and all situations. And this is why I was very glad to see during this ASH meeting 2021 further studies investigating other treatment options. And of course, I can spend hours highlighting many studies. However, I thought to select 3 studies which are important in my opinion. One study is a randomized phase 3 trial from China, a multi-center randomized trial, which looked into mesenchymal cells in combination with anti-CD25, the IL-2 receptor, and calcineurin inhibitor in the steroid-refractory acute GvHD. And the investigators performed a randomized trial in more than 200 patients, comparing calcineurin inhibitors plus anti-CD25 versus calcineurin inhibitor plus anti-CD25 and mesenchymal stem cells. And to make a long story short, they could show that adding mesenchymal cells is proving beneficial because there is a statistically significant advantage in favor of the mesenchymal cell arm. Well, obviously, this is very encouraging. However, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the mesenchymal cell story in acute GvHD, in steroid-refractory acute GvHD, has been around for many, many years. And it is cellular therapy. And like any cellular therapy, it has some logistical complexities. The nature of the cells is not always easy to define. And well, here we have this study which is positive, but we have also other studies which did not yield to such positive results. So the use of mesenchymal cells for steroid-refractory acute GvHD remains, I think, in my opinion, an open question. The other study that I have selected from this ASH 2021 meeting is a study which was presented by the Minneapolis group, and this is about the use of urinary-derived human chorionic gonadotropin epidermal growth factor. And actually, this is a widely available drug, I think, in the gynecology field. In some countries, I think the brand name is Pregnil or something like this. Here, the authors wanted to take benefit of the immune modulatory, but also immunosuppressive activity of this widely available agent, and apparently relatively non-expensive. And they have tested it in a small cohort, actually two cohorts, one with steroid-refractory acute GvHD, 22 patients, but also another small cohort was a patient with high-risk acute GvHD. And again, I'll not go to all the details of the characteristics. There was nothing special regarding the characteristics of the patient. Nevertheless, the authors could document a relatively high response rate, and the conclusion of the work was that this is feasible and promising and attractive. Again, the question is, how does it compare to other options? Obviously, we do not have any randomized trial or comparative trial. So I don't know whether we'll have such randomized trial given the wide availability of this agent. Nevertheless, I think it is worth to have this option in mind for some patients. Last but not least, and this is really, in my opinion, a very important study, was a study presented actually by our group in this ASH 2021 meeting, and that was a multi-center phase 2 trial looking into the use of fecal microbiota transfer. So here we are tackling a different frontier, I would say, because all the other agents that were tested or being tested in the field of acute and steroid-refractory acute GvHD are mainly immunosuppressive agents. And here the goal is beyond immunosuppression, is rather about restoring the immune equilibrium, the immune homeostasis, the balance, in order to favor a sort of tolerance. And actually, that was the study called HERACLES, which was reported using FMT. And interestingly, and this is, I think, an important point, the investigational product being tested is a pooled product. So it's not a single donor FMT, but rather a pooled donor. And I think this is crucial because it allows you to have within the same product, within a drug, a very rich, very high diversity, much more higher than what you would expect from a single donor. And I think this is crucial in this population of steroid-refractory acute GvHD. And another important feature about this study was that it was focused on the grade 3 and 4 steroid-refractory acute GvHD with gut involvement, mainly gut involvement. And we know that this is the truly unmet medical need because the prognosis of these patients is clearly related to the GI involvement. And the results were very impressive, actually, roughly 40% response rate at day 28, including VGPRs and CRs. But the other important piece of information is about the translational study that were performed in parallel to the clinical part. And these translational studies could bring a sort of proof of concept about the added value and the feasibility and the concept of this approach, clearly showing that diversity is increasing, but also other data showing that we are inducing through this FMT the immunoregulatory pathways and, for instance, the butyrate pathways. And the other important aspect in this communication was also the description of another cohort of patients who received the same product. So, by the way, the product is MAT13. This is the code of the drug, where the drug was given outside clinical trial in an early access program in a more than 50 patients. And the results are even better than what you would see in the clinical trial. And these were patients highly advanced who received prior lines of therapies, not first line steroid refractory, but also who received and failed ruxolitinib. And again, the results are quite impressive, further highlighting the benefit of using FMT for steroid refractory acute GvHD. And obviously the next step is about a phase 3 trial, which is about to start very soon. So in summary, as you can see, the field of acute GvHD continues to move in the right direction, in my opinion. More and more options are being available, and now with the advent of microbiota transfer, I think we are trying to hit new frontiers, and hopefully will be able to improve the outcome of these patients, because we should not forget that allogeneic stem cell transplantations remains the only curative treatment option for many patients. And this is why it is extremely important to be able not only to prevent, but also to treat whenever needed steroid refractory acute GvHD.
Thank you for listening to the GvHD Hub podcast. We would also like to thank our supporters, Insight, Novartis, and Syndax.
GvHD Hub podcasts, brought to you by Scientific Education Support.